What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel, and in today's video we're going to be talking about a film I just got back from the theaters from seeing, and that film is called Presence. Directed by Steven Soderbergh, this film stars people like Callina Liang, Chris Sullivan, Lucy Liu, Eddie Mayday, and many more. And before we get too far into this video, if you like reviews for up-to-date movies like this, as well as retrospective reviews, live streams, and the occasional vlog, then you're in the right place, and I'd like to ask you to consider subscribing to the channel. But if you're a returning viewer, well, thank you so much for coming back. And today we're going to be talking about Presence, which is a film that is directed by Steven Soderbergh, who's a director I've always enjoyed. He's put out some really great films, especially back in the day. So when I saw he had a new film coming from Neon, I was pretty excited. I thought this was going to be a horror film, and what I will say is that I think this is being marketed in a way that's maybe a little bit more creepy to kind of pull people in, but this easily has got to be one of the most interesting and unique ghost stories I've ever seen in my life. So before we get into my thoughts on the film, let's talk about what this movie is all about. Presence focuses on a family who's moving into a home for the first time, only to slowly discover that there is indeed a presence in the house. The entire film is incredibly unique because it takes place from the eyes, from the POV of the presence that's in the home. So we see the entire movie through the ghost's perspective. And it instantly made me think of Nickel Boys from last year, which was a film obviously not about a ghost, but that was done through the lens of one of the main characters. Now this one's obviously a little bit more different because you have a ghost at the center of it who's kind of walking around this house. We see everything through their lens. So you do have this really interesting cinematography throughout the course of the film that's coming from an individual who isn't seen by any of the main characters in the film and doesn't speak. So this character has to be a character in its movements and in its actions as a ghost without actually ever saying anything or directly interacting with the characters in a way where there's a character-to-character dynamic. And I thought that really lended itself immediately to a very interesting dynamic. Right out of the gate, we learn that they're moving to this home because of some stuff that's happened in the past, but most notably, we learn that the daughter who we spend most of the time with in this film, Chloe, played by Callina Liang, her two friends recently just died from drug overdose, and she's struggling with this. Her mental health is cracking, and we immediately learn that the family dynamic here isn't necessarily the best. The dad is the one that's the most sympathetic to the daughter. He's trying to be this great dad and friend to her as time goes on and with what she's going through. Lucy Liu, who plays the mom in the mix here, is a little bit more disconnected. She's far more in love with her son, their firstborn, and she wants him to go ahead and achieve all his dreams. So she's willing to do everything and anything that's possible to make sure that he does that, and she doesn't necessarily give her daughter the exact same love. So we immediately learn that there's a bit of a discourse and a bit of a weird dynamic between the parents. The brother and sister don't necessarily get along, but the sister is going through a lot. The brother Tyler, played by Eddie Mayday, is a bit of a jock and cares far more about his popularity and his status and his ability to push on with his life in school and in the different things that he wants to do in his life, more so than actually caring about his sister's mental health or even his family for that matter. And so over the course of the film, we start to learn about this weird dynamic, again, all being done through the eyes of the ghost that we're following here. Now, as the movie plays out, we start to see that the character of Chloe is the only one who's starting to feel this presence, and she starts to immediately think that it's connected to one of her close friends who passed away due to drug overdose. She thinks that is the spirit that is lingering over her over the course of the film. And as the film plays out, we eventually see the spirits start to kind of mingle in their life and having to do some ghost things, shaking things up, dropping things to try to interfere in some of the things that take place in this film. And that's all I'll say without getting into spoilers. What I can say about this film immediately is that I think it's easily one of the most different films in the world of ghost films that I've ever seen in my entire life. Outside of that, this is easily one of the most different films in the entirety of Steven Soderbergh's filmography here. There's nothing like this in his filmography, so I really appreciate a really different big swing here, because I think there's going to be some people that are going to watch this film and probably really not enjoy it, but there are going to be people who really enjoy this. I think that the artistic swing is going to work for some and not work for others. And I will be honest in saying that I felt a real great sense of ebb and flow with this movie as time was going on. There were parts of this movie that I was really impressed with the filmmaking, that I was really into what was going on in the story portion, especially as the ghost starts to become more involved and starts to kind of interfere with the lives of these individuals, and they're kind of starting to become more aware of the fact that there is indeed a presence in this house. Those are the elements I found myself really engaged with. But as time went on, I started to question to myself, is this POV ghost storytelling a bit of a gimmick? There was times where I felt that, there was times where I didn't feel that, there was times where I felt it was really well used, there was times where I felt it was maybe meandering a little bit. And so I can be honest in saying that I'm a little bit torn with it, even as I'm talking with you guys about it right now. This is a film that I'm really impressed with on a lot of levels. It's a film that I feel myself really appreciating when it comes down to taking a big swing on the artistic side of things. But it's one of those things where as the film was playing out, I was really up and down with how I felt about it. And I think a lot of that has to do with the characters we're following here, because the character of Chloe is easily and immediately meant to be the one that you care for the most. She's a character that you're meant to sympathize for. She's the character you're meant to feel for. And the dad, being this kind of like, good dad trying to be there for his daughter kind of character, is easily the second most likable character in the film. And it's without a doubt, obviously, kind of set up for Tyler and the mom in this situation to be incredibly unlikable. And so it became this really interesting and sometimes frustrating thing as a viewer, because you're not watching a film that's staged in the very straightforward way in terms of creating a film. This is a film that very much is trying to give you a different perspective and isn't really trying to build character development and a story with a 3-act structure in the same way another film would, because of the way that they choose to tell this story. And so because of that, a lot of times a lot of these characters were unlikable. A lot of times certain scenes felt like they meandered, and a lot of times it felt like, where are we really going with this? And I won't lie, as we were getting closer to the end of the film, there's a big element to this film that has to do with a romantic element that kind of goes sour, that started to kind of make me wonder, why is this happening? Why was this what they wrote for the film? It was just kind of starting to make me feel gross for even watching the film. And I don't want to give away too much, but there was an element to the film as we got to the end that I was like, why is this what we're doing here? And then the movie comes to an end, and this is one of those movies that it was really the entire picture. It was getting to the end and seeing how it resolves that made me think, okay, I appreciate this film a lot more now. I feel like it had a little bit more of an entire package. It's a movie that really relies on you seeing the entire thing to be like, okay, I see what they were going for here. I see the vision. I see how it all connects now. I see how all of this kind of works in unison. And I won't lie though, earlier in the film, there was times I was just losing it a little bit with the film, and then I was back on board. And then there was times I was kind of lost with the film again, and then I was back on board. I was never confused as to what was happening entirely. I was in on the mystery around who this presence is and what's going to happen with these characters, but the story wasn't as riveting for me, and it really wasn't until the end of the film that I saw what the story was really setting up that gave me a little bit more appreciation for the film. And so I say it in all these different ways just to make it clear that this is clearly a film that left me torn, but it's a film that ultimately I was really impressed with in a lot of ways as well. I think there's going to be people who are going to walk out of this film thinking that the cinematography element of it and the POV element is a little bit of a gimmick and that the story isn't really all that great, but I can also see many people walking out of this film thinking this is one of the most unique and interesting films in the world of ghost storytelling, and I found myself somewhere in the middle. I really do think this is a film that is unique and interesting in the world of telling a ghost story. It's more of a thinker, less so than it is a scary movie, and I think I went into this expecting a horror movie, only to learn that's not the case here. It's really not a scary movie. There's nothing about this film that is scary. I think it's kind of set up to make you feel like there's going to be a creep factor, but there really wasn't. And so yeah, I was kind of impressed with what I was actually surprised by, but also kind of thinking, oh man, like, how do I feel about this fully? This is the movie I'm going to have to sit with over time, but I do think it's a film that is worth watching, and I do think the performances across the board are really solid. I think the cinematography, despite maybe feeling gimmicky to some, is well done. You have a lot of handheld motion that has to keep up with the actors, which, because they're going with this kind of approach with the POV, leads to us having tons of longer sequences where the characters had to clearly, do these big long takes. The actors have to do these huge long takes where they have to play out these sequences, and obviously there was a lot of rehearsal. You have characters that are upstairs and downstairs in other rooms, and then the camera will just not cut as we go through this entirety of this sequence. Some characters are downstairs, we have dialogue, we move up, and the characters up there are saying their dialogue. Sometimes you can hear characters speaking in other rooms, and so there was clearly a lot of rehearsal in terms of the performances to make it all feel like a normal family that you're watching here. And on that level, I thought it was really impressive too. So I enjoyed the performances. I thought it was a very interesting and creative film in a lot of ways. And it's also a very quiet film. Outside of the dialogue and the noises of the characters walking around or picking things up, it's not a film that's reliant on a lot of music. And when it does have music, I actually really enjoyed it. It had a really nice, kind of very somber, but very peaceful at the same time, a musical score that was heavily reliant solely on piano. And I love when you can have a film that has piano music that's able to kind of capture different tones. And this film film in particular with this musical score was able to capture, like I said, an element that made you feel sad and had a somber nature to it, but also had an element to it that was also peaceful. And I really enjoyed that. I thought that the film in general had a lot of pieces to it that I thought really worked. And it left me in a place where I'm like, while I am torn on it, I really do appreciate a lot that this film did. I do think it's a really unique film in a lot of ways, and I also think it's a film many people are going to love, but it's also a film I'm going to see a divisive kind of opinions on. I see some people are going to walk out of this thinking, I didn't like that at all. And I think I'll understand both reactions 100%. Ultimately, this is a film that worked for me more because of how it ended. It really kind of brought it all together for me. But I do think a lot of people who maybe bow out of this movie a little bit early, maybe they stop at a certain point on streaming one day down the line, or walk out of the theater and maybe miss something in the film to go to the bathroom or whatever, may not fully appreciate everything this film is trying to say. This is not a film for everybody, but I certainly think if you're a big fan of film and you're a fan of ghost stories and you're looking for something a little unique and different, this film is certainly worth your time. So that's going to be my thoughts on Presence. Obviously, a lot of rambly thoughts there. As you can tell, I'm torn on the film, but I do think it's a film that's worth discussing, and I do think it's a film that many people are going to have a lot to say on, and I look forward to the discussion. So if you've already seen the film and that's what brought you to this review, or you're a fan of the channel already and you plan to check it out, whatever the case may be, leave any and all comments down below. Let me know what you guys thought about the movie. Are you planning on checking it out? Did you already check it out? Whatever the case may be, I'll see you beautiful people in the next one. Bye-bye.